I've always believed that a home has a feeling, a heartbeat of its own. And the heartbeat of my home had been slowing down for months, quietly, subtly, until the day it nearly stopped. My name is Margaret Harlow, and I spent 34 years believing I knew the man I married, believing I knew what loyalty looked like, what faithfulness felt like, what a shared life meant. But that morning, I learned that even after 3 decades, you can sleep beside a stranger. It started as simply as anything in this house ever does, with a cup of coffee. I stood in my little yellow-tiled kitchen, the one Frank promised we'd remodel 20 years ago, but never did, sipping from a mug that had long gone cold. The morning sun was soft and pale through the window, but it did nothing to warm me. The silence felt different, too heavy, as if it were carrying a secret Frank had left early again, before sunrise, claiming he needed to open the dealership ahead of time. He'd been doing that often lately. Too often I told myself not to think too much about it. After all, 34 years should earn a little trust, shouldn't it? But trust is a fragile thing. Once you feel a crack, you hear it everywhere. I needed a pair of scissors that morning to open a delivery of baking supplies, and that's what brought me into Frank's home office, a room I rarely entered because he always said, "Maggie, this is my space. Don't worry yourself with the mess." But I wasn't looking for trouble. I truly wasn't. I just wanted scissors. Whether it was fate or some painful blessing in disguise, I opened the wrong drawer. The top drawer of his desk slid out smoothly, too smoothly for how old it was. Pens, receipts, a tangled charger, and then a small velvet pouch. I don't know why my heart dropped. Maybe women just know, even when we don't want to know. I picked it up gently, as if it might scream, opened it slowly, and inside was a delicate gold bracelet, a beautiful, expensive one, far younger and fancier than anything Frank had ever bought me. My hands trembled as I turned it over, and that's when I saw the engraving. TJ. Just 2 letters. But sometimes 2 letters can burn your whole world down. I stood there, frozen, the bracelet warm from my skin, the truth cold in my chest, because I didn't need to ask whose initials those were. I already knew. Recognition. A slow, painful recognition. Because deep inside, I already knew someone with those initials. TJ Tessa Jordan. 27. Pretty in that delicate way young women are. Soft-spoken, gentle, with hair she always curled before Sunday service, and the beloved choir director at St. Mark's Church, the church Frank volunteered at every other Thursday. Our church. My church. At least, I thought it was my heart didn't break in a loud way. It didn't shatter or explode. It simply sank, like a stone slipping to the bottom of a lake. I placed the bracelet back exactly as I'd found it, closed the drawer quietly, and stood there in the stillness of that outdated office, trying to breathe past the sharpness in my chest. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger is loud. But betrayal is silent. I walked back into the kitchen and sat down, staring at the steamless coffee. My hands wrapped around the mug as if warmth could seep back into me, but before I could gather my thoughts, I heard the crunch of gravel outside. Frank was home. The front door opened, and his voice carried into the house, too cheerful, too easy. "Maggie, you up?" I swallowed the bitter taste of truth. "In the kitchen." He walked in like everything was normal, grabbing a banana off the counter. His hair was neatly combed, damp at the ends, freshly washed, but not here, not in our bathroom. He smiled. Forgot my dealership keys. Lie, I felt it instantly. After 34 years, you learn a man's tales. Frank's was simple. Whenever he lied, he never made eye contact. He didn't now either. I watched him leave again. Watched him walk, not to his truck, but to the old shed behind the house. His private space. He slipped something small into his jacket. Something shiny. Not dealership keys. Another gift. Another lie. Another secret wrapped in velvet. When he finally drove away, gravel scattering under his tires, I stood at the kitchen window with my hands pressed against the counter, and something inside me hardened. My mother used to say, "A woman doesn't break when she's betrayed. She transforms." And in that moment, I felt it. The transformation, quiet, steady, inevitable. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. And I wasn't going to crumble like some fragile thing made of memories, no. I was going to find out everything. Piece by piece, lie by lie, truth by truth. And when I finally understood the whole picture, I would decide exactly how to tear it apart. Because something inside me whispered, "Margaret, you have been quiet long enough." The betrayal had already begun. But the consequences, those were coming. And trust me, I wasn't the one who should be afraid. If you're listening to my story right now, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which city you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. For the rest of that morning, I moved through the house like a ghost. Quiet, steady, almost invisible. My body went through the motions of routine, but my mind was unraveling a thread I had ignored for too long. I washed the dishes, folded laundry, swept the kitchen floor, all the simple chores I had done for decades, except this time, every small sound, every little movement felt amplified by the truth I wasn't ready to speak aloud. Frank returned home like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't hidden a bracelet. Like he hadn't come back for something he lied about. Like he hadn't shattered 34 years of trust. He strolled into the kitchen, loosened his tie, sighed dramatically, and plopped into his recliner in the living room. "Maggie, sweetheart," he called, "how about we go out to dinner tonight? Haven't done that in a while." Dinner. He wanted dinner. A date night. The same man who bought jewelry for someone else wanted to take me to dinner. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked into the living room, studying his face. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I hadn't noticed that lately. Now I did. "I'm tired," I said softly. "Maybe another time." He didn't push. He didn't question. He simply nodded, almost relieved. And that was the second crack. The next morning I woke up before sunrise, something I rarely did anymore. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because something inside me had shifted. I felt alert, awake, ready. Frank was snoring lightly beside me. The same soft rumbling I used to find comforting. Now it just sounded like a noise filling a space where affection used to be. I slipped out of bed quietly, grabbed my robe, and walked into the kitchen. I made myself a strong cup of coffee. Black, the way I drank it back when I first married Frank. Back when life was leaner, but lighter. As the coffee brewed, I looked out the window at the yard. The shed. The one Frank guarded like a dragon protecting treasure. What was in there? What else was he hiding? For years he claimed it was just old equipment and junk, but yesterday's little secret proved otherwise. I looked toward the hallway, making sure the house was still. Frank was snoring. Good. I grabbed the spare shed key from our junk drawer, the same drawer he thought I never looked in, and stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, with that cool Kentucky bite that wakes your bones before your brain. The shed stood there quietly, almost innocent looking in the soft morning light. But secrets have a smell. And betrayal has a way of lingering. I opened the door. At first glance, everything looked harmless. Old fishing gear, a few boxes of Christmas decorations, a workbench covered in dusty tools. But then, I saw it. A small duffel bag tucked under the workbench. Too clean. Too new. Too intentionally hidden. I reached for it slowly, almost afraid of what I'd find. When I unzipped it, the first thing I saw was a bottle of cologne, an expensive one Frank had never worn around me. Next to it was a pressed shirt, folded perfectly. And beneath that, a card, a handwritten note. My heart thudded violently as I picked it up. Can't wait to see you Thursday night. Wear the navy shirt? You know the one. Tea, Thursday night. Tonight. He wasn't planning a church volunteer meeting. He wasn't planning overtime. He wasn't planning anything honorable. He was planning her. My throat tightened. I put everything back carefully, zipped the bag, and closed the shed door without making a sound. The world looked different when I stepped back into the morning light. Colder, sharper, clearer. And suddenly I realized something. I didn't feel broken. I felt angry. But not wild, screaming anger. Not the kind that makes you lose control. No. This was quiet, calculating. A new kind of strength twisting inside me like a tide shifting direction. I wasn't the same Maggie who baked apple pies for church fundraisers, or the Maggie who packed Frank's lunch every day for 30 years, or the Maggie who forgave him for every tiny insult he shrugged off as a joke. No. This was a different Maggie. A Maggie who finally saw the truth. By the time Frank came into the kitchen, yawning and pretending to stretch, I already had a plan forming. Slowly, like dough, rising in a warm oven. "Morning, sweetheart," he muttered, rubbing his eyes. He didn't even notice my red eyes, or my stiff shoulders, or the way I stared at him too long, memorizing the face of the man who betrayed me. He just grabbed his coffee and kissed my cheek. "I'll be home late tonight. A lot of paperwork at the dealership. Lie number 3. I smiled sweetly. "Of course, Frank. Take your time." He didn't see the shift in my eyes, but I felt it. Because when a woman discovers betrayal, something ancient wakes inside her. Something powerful, something patient. Frank left the house humming, like a man with no guilt at all. As soon as he drove away, I picked up my phone. My hands were steady, my voice calm. I dialed someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Linda Parker, a retired school principal and the biggest guardian angel of gossip in our entire county. If something happened, Linda knew. If someone had secrets, Linda found out. She answered on the second ring. "Well, if it isn't Maggie Harlow bin Ages. What's wrong? Your voice sounds tight." I didn't cry. I didn't break. I simply said, "Linda, I need to know everything you can tell me about a girl named Tessa Jordan." There was a pause, a long one. Then Linda let out a sound that wasn't quite a gasp, but close. "Oh, honey," she whispered, "you'd better sit down." My knees weakened, but I stayed standing. I needed strength for what came next. "Honey," Linda said quietly, "you have no idea what kind of girl you're dealing with." Her words weren't the end of something. They were the beginning. When Linda Parker tells you to sit down, you sit down. But I stayed standing in my kitchen, one hand gripping the counter, the other holding the phone to my ear. My heart thudded slowly, like it was bracing itself for impact. Linda took a breath, the kind women take when they're about to deliver news heavy enough to knock someone down. Maggie, you remember that fundraiser we had at St. Mark's last year? The quilt auction. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Of course, I baked the lemon bars for it. Yes. And you remember that new choir director? The young one who wore those floral dresses and called everybody ma'am? A chill ran down my spine. Tessa, I whispered. Linda said, a sound packed with more meaning than words. Well, she's not who people think she is. My grip on the counter tightened. What do you mean? She plays sweet, Linda continued. But I've heard things. From parents at the school, from folks at church, from women whose husbands got a little too friendly with her. I closed my eyes. My stomach twisted. She's been seen out late, with men she shouldn't be alone with, Linda said. Married men. Older men. Men who should have known better. My breath hitched. I suddenly felt every one of my 58 years settle on my shoulders. She smiles that shy little smile, Linda kept going. But she knows exactly what she's doing. And she's done it before. Before. That word cut deeper than any knife could. I whispered, You're saying she targets married men. Linda exhaled. I'm saying. She's trouble, sweetheart. Quiet trouble. The kind that sneaks in through the side door and sits at your dinner table before you realize she's taken your seat. My eyes stung, but I refused to let tears fall. Not yet. Not for them. I cleared my throat. Linda, how long have people known? There was a beat of silence, and then Linda said the thing that changed everything. Maggie, I think Frank's name came up once. My heart stopped completely. He volunteered at the church. Linda's voice softened. They rehearsed music together. She laughed too hard at his jokes, and she started wearing those fitted dresses on Thursdays. Thursday. The night she wanted to meet him. The night he packed that navy shirt. I leaned against the counter, the room spinning slowly. Why didn't anyone tell me? I whispered. Linda sighed. Because you always looked so proud of Frank, and no one wanted to break your heart unless they were sure. Proud. That word tasted bitter now I thought of the countless times I defended Frank, when people teased him for flirting too much at social gatherings. I thought of how I brushed off comments about his wandering eyes. I thought of how I convinced myself he was just friendly. But friendly men don't hide jewelry in desk drawers, and friendly men don't meet choir directors at night. Linda's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. Maggie, I'm sorry. Truly. But you're a strong woman. Stronger than most. You need to know the truth so you can decide what to do next. For a moment, all I could hear was my pulse slow, heavy, angry. What do you do when the person you devoted your entire adult life to betrays you like this? Do you confront them? Do you scream? Do you pack your bags? Do you throw them out? Maybe some women would. But I wasn't some women. I had been silent for years. Too many years. And silence had turned me invisible in my own marriage. Not anymore. Thank you, Linda. I managed. I appreciate you telling me. Do you want me to ask around discreetly? She offered. See what else I can find. A slow, cold calm settled over me. Yes, I said. Find out everything. Consider it done, she replied. And then she added, her voice soft and fierce. And Maggie, whatever you do next, don't do it alone. But she didn't know me. Not fully. Not the part of me that had been growing stronger with each lie I discovered. When I hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't collapse. I picked up a notebook, a pen, and I began writing. Dates, times, excuses Frank had given me over the last few months. Nights he came home late. Days he Forgot his ring. Moments he claimed he was volunteering at the church, but came back smelling of cologne he never wore. Piece by piece, lie by lie, I built a timeline, and as the pieces came together, so did a conviction. I would not confront him, yet. Not now, not with half-truths or suspicions. No, I would gather everything, every detail, every whisper of proof. And then I would make sure the truth didn't just come out. I would make sure it exploded. That evening I cooked dinner like I always did. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, steamed green beans. Frank came home smelling fresh. Too fresh for a long day at the dealership. He kissed my cheek, sat down and started eating like nothing was wrong. "How was your day?" he asked, casually. Taking a bite of meatloaf, I watched him chew. Watched the way he avoided my eyes again. "Oh, ordinary," I said. "Quiet. Yours?" "Busy," he sighed. "Long day. Lie. He didn't even blink. He finished dinner, showered, laid out a crisp navy shirt on the chair. The same navy shirt the card mentioned. He thought I didn't notice. He thought I didn't know. He thought he was clever. But he didn't know yet who I was becoming, what I was planning, or how public his downfall would be. Later, as he pretended to fall asleep early, I stood in the doorway watching him. The man I married. The man I loved. The man I sacrificed years of my life for. But that man was gone. Replaced by someone who thought lies could be hidden under navy shirts and velvet pouches. I stepped back quietly and whispered, "Enjoy tonight, Frank, because it won't be long before everyone sees who you really are." And in that whisper, something inside me awakened fully. This wasn't just betrayal. It was preparation for the storm I was about to bring. The next morning, I woke up with a strange steadiness in my chest. Not calm, not peace, but focus. A kind of sharpened clarity I hadn't felt in years. Frank was already gone. His pillow cold, his side of the bed neatly made, as if he'd never slept there at all. The navy shirt he'd laid out the night before was missing. So it had begun. But he had no idea I was awake long before he left. He had no idea I heard him hum under his breath, the same way he always did when he was excited. He had no idea that while he slipped out the door, I memorized the sound of his truck rolling down the driveway. What he also didn't know was this. I wasn't planning to spend the day baking pies or cleaning floors. I was planning to find the truth. I made coffee, but not the way I usually did. I brewed it strong, dark, like the women in my family used to drink when they were preparing for something difficult. I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook. Yesterday's notes stared back at me. Dates, times, excuses, lies, and today there would be more. At 8:15 a.m., my phone vibrated. Linda. I answered before the first ring finished. She didn't bother with greetings. "Well, honey," I asked around like you wanted. My stomach tightened. "What did you find?" "A lot more than I expected." Her voice dropped low. "People have seen them together. Not intimately, but close. Too close." I swallowed hard. "How close?" "Frank attends choir rehearsals that don't require volunteers. He's been seen talking to her behind the church after service. He's been taking donations to her office. And 3 separate people saw them leaving together last month after that community dinner." My breath hitched. That community dinner. I baked an entire table of desserts for it. Linda continued. "And word is, she broke up a marriage in the next county 2 years ago. Same pattern. Older married man. Secret meetups. Little gifts." My chest tightened. "I see." "Do you want the name of the woman she hurt?" Linda asked gently. "No," I said after a moment. "Not yet. I want to hear the truth from his actions, not someone else's wounds. Linda sighed. "You're stronger than you know, Maggie." I thanked her again, hung up, and stared at the table surface. My reflection looked foreign, my eyes sharper, my mouth firmer, as if I were meeting a new version of myself, a version who would not be fooled again. Around 11, I made my decision. If Frank could follow Tessa, I could follow Frank. For the first time since my 20s, I grabbed my car keys, tied my hair back, and left the house without leaving a note on the counter. My hands trembled just a little as I started the engine, not out of fear, but out of something deeper, anticipation. I drove toward town with the familiarity of someone who had lived. There, her whole life, past the grocery store, the post office, the diner where Frank and I had our first breakfast date. And then, toward the dealership. Frank's silver truck wasn't there. Of course, it wasn't. I parked 2 blocks away and waited. I had never done something like this before. Follow someone, spy on someone. But I didn't feel shame. I felt justified. After all, I wasn't the one breaking vows. At 11:42 a.m., I saw his truck, driving slowly, purposefully, not toward the dealership, but toward the old Elmwood Road exit, the road that led to the church, and beyond. My heart raced. I waited a moment, then followed at a safe distance. He drove past the church, past the library, past the entire town, until finally he turned into a gravel driveway behind the Blue Lantern Inn, a quiet, secluded place with private side entrances and weekend couples deals. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. He parked near the back, not in the main lot hidden. Then I saw her car. A little white compact number, Tessa's. I recognized the bumper sticker from church, and I felt something cold settle in my bones. He got out of the truck, fixed his collar, checked his reflection in the window. Then he pulled out a small box from his pocket. A ring-sized box, no. No, no, no. I gripped the dashboard so tightly my knuckles turned white. He walked to the side door and knocked softly, a knock that sounded like practice, like habit. Moments later, she opened the door, her hair curled, her smile wide, her hands reaching for him. He stepped inside, and the door closed. For a long moment I couldn't breathe, not because of the betrayal. I had already accepted that part, but because of something sharper, something like insult. He used to knock on our front door like that when we first dated. He used to bring me little boxes like that on anniversaries. He used to smile with that same crooked pride when he surprised me. Now he gave all of that, all those pieces of our past, to a woman who was young enough to be our daughter. I sat there in my car as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gravel. And then, the strangest thing happened. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't fall apart. I laughed. A small, shocked laugh that escaped my chest before I could stop it. Because suddenly, after all these months of feeling invisible, small, forgotten, I realized something simple. Frank wasn't a prize, and Tessa didn't steal him. She inherited a problem, and oh, how little she knew what kind of problem he truly was. I wiped my eyes, not from tears, but from clarity, and turned the engine back on. I didn't need to follow them inside. I didn't need to see anything more. I had all the truth I needed. Now it was my turn to plan, my turn to expose, my turn to decide how their little secret would end. And trust me, I was not going to end it quietly. When I drove away from the Blue Lantern Inn, something inside me shifted forever. Not because of the betrayal. I had already swallowed that bitter truth, not because of the shock. I'd expected this outcome from the moment I saw that bracelet. No. What changed was me. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't acting out of fear, or confusion, or heartbreak. I was acting out of clarity. And clarity is powerful. The moment I reached home, the house felt different. Not haunted, not heavy, just waiting, like it knew something was coming. I placed my purse on the table, hung my keys, and stood in the middle of the kitchen. The same place I had cried, laughed, cooked, for decades. But today, I didn't feel like a wife standing in her kitchen. I felt like a woman preparing for battle. The first thing I did was grab my notebook, my growing book of truths, and write a single sentence across the top of a fresh page. He chose his secrets. Now I will choose the truth. And beneath it, I began outlining the plan forming in my mind. Not revenge. Not exactly. No. What I wanted was justice public, undeniable, unforgettable justice. Because men like Frank don't understand quiet consequences. They don't understand subtle lessons. They don't understand shame until the whole world sees it. And I was going to make sure the whole world did. I spent the next hour pacing the house, thinking, mapping out possibilities. Should I confront them? Should I follow them again? Should I tell the church? Should I tell her family? Should I tell everyone? But each option felt too simple, too easy. Frank had humiliated me slowly, quietly, behind closed doors. I wanted the opposite. I wanted him to feel the kind of humiliation that echoes, the kind that burns, the kind that makes a man's name whispered for all the wrong reasons. But I needed more information, more pieces, more evidence. I dialed Linda again. She picked up immediately. "Yes, honey?" "Linda," I said, my voice steady. "I need a favor." "Of course, anything. I need every bit of information you can find on Tessa, her background, her past relationships, any rumors, anything odd about her joining the church." There was a pause. Then, "Oh, sweetheart," she said slowly. "You're planning something, aren't you?" "I'm planning clarity," I answered. Linda chuckled, a knowing, approving sound. "Well, you're talking to the right woman. I'll get everything by tonight." "Thank you. And Maggie," she added, "do it smart. Do it carefully and do it in a way he'll never forget." "I will," I said. And I meant it. Around 4 p.m., I heard Frank's truck in the driveway. He came home earlier than usual. Guilty men often do. They tried to behave normally, hoping their lies stay hidden. He walked into the house humming. Humming. That sound used to comfort me. Now it disgusted me. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, kissing the top of my head. "Traffic was terrible today." Lie. 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 I smiled gently. "That's all right. Dinner will be ready soon." Pretending was surprisingly easy. Maybe because he had been pretending for months. He washed up, changed into his worn sweatpants, and sat in his recliner. He flipped channels like nothing in the world was wrong. I watched him from the kitchen doorway. Every movement, every expression, every unconscious lie he lived inside. For 34 years I had cooked, cleaned, cared for this man. But today, I wasn't his wife. I was the calm before his storm. After dinner he kissed my cheek again, the same fake affection he used to cloak his guilt. "I'll be late tomorrow, too," he said casually. "Big sale coming up." My jaw clenched, but I kept my voice soft. "That's fine, Frank. Do what you need to do." He smiled, relieved, not knowing he'd just handed me his next opportunity. He went to bed early. I stayed up late. I walked into the dining room, pulled open the drawer where he kept old receipts, and found what I'd been hoping for. his church volunteer schedule, his dealership schedule, his financial statements shoved carelessly into an envelope, and then the jackpot. A small receipt from a jewelry store in Lexington. Purchased last month. The item: gold bracelet with engraving. My hands didn't shake. My breathing didn't hitch, because now I had proof, not just suspicion, not just a hidden pouch. Solid, undeniable proof. I slipped the receipt into my notebook and wrote, "This will be the first thing everyone sees." Everyone. Because this time, I wasn't settling for quiet truth. I wasn't settling for polite forgiveness. I wasn't settling for a private confrontation behind closed doors. No, Frank wanted a secret. He chose the wrong wife. I wanted the truth seen. He chose the wrong woman to betray. The next morning, Linda called me again. "Maggie," she said, breathless, "you need to hear this. Tell me." Her voice dropped into a whisper. "Turns out Tessa isn't just a flirt. She's been asked to leave 2 churches before ours." I froze. "What? Why?" "Same reason." Another pause. "She got involved with married men both times, quietly forced out. Both times the husbands lied to protect her." My skin prickled. Of course they did. Men like Frank always do. And Tessa, she wasn't just careless. She was practiced. A professional homewrecker hiding behind hymns and innocence. Linda continued. "People tried warning Pastor Gaines about her when she applied here, but he said she deserved a fresh start." A fresh start. At my expense. I felt something ignite inside me. Not sorrow, not heartbreak, but fire. I thanked Linda, hung up, and opened my notebook again. And I wrote, "She's done this before, but she chose the wrong marriage this time." That night, Frank came home late again. The same cologne, the same lies, the same pretense. And as he walked past me to grab a beer from the fridge, I watched him carefully. He truly believed he was safe, untouched, undefeated, unexposed. He truly believed he was in control. But he wasn't. Not anymore. Because I had every piece I needed, every thread, every truth in a plan forming that would undo them both. Slowly. Publicly. Unforgettably. While Frank watched sports on the recliner, I stepped into the hallway, shut the bathroom door, and whispered to myself in the mirror, "Just a little longer. Let him lie a little longer. The fall will be harder that way." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. If you're listening to my story right now, please like, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. Your support means everything to me. By the time Friday morning arrived, the air in my house felt electric, as if the walls themselves knew something was about to happen. Something long overdue. Frank left early again, claiming he had a staff meeting at the dealership. That lie rolled off his tongue so casually, I almost admired the confidence it took to be so shameless almost. He kissed the top of my head, grabbed his thermos, and walked out. He had no idea I'd watched him tuck the same navy shirt into his gym bag last night. He had no idea I knew exactly where he was going. And he had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead of him. The moment the front door closed, I dialed Linda. She answered with a gasp. "Tell me, you're ready." "I'm past ready," I said. "Did you get everything?" "Oh, honey, I got more than everything." She came over within 20 minutes, a folder tucked under her arm. She set it on the table as if it were a stack of court evidence. Inside were printed screenshots of Tessa's old social media pages, the ones she deleted after leaving her previous churches. Photos of her cozying up to married men. Flirty comments. A picture of her at a hotel restaurant with a man wearing a wedding ring. 2 newspaper clippings from 2 different counties. Local choir director leaves position unexpectedly. Church volunteer resigns after rumors of inappropriate relationship. No names were mentioned in the articles, but the pattern was unmistakable. And then, the biggest piece of all, a copy of a written complaint from a pastor in her previous church, describing boundary concerns with congregation members, including married individuals. It wasn't legally incriminating, but morally. It was damning. I swallowed hard. "You're sure about all this?" Linda nodded firmly, every word, every page. "Thank you," I whispered. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Sweetheart, you're doing what half the women in this town wish they'd done when they were in your shoes." Maybe she was right. But I wasn't thinking about other women. I was thinking about myself, my dignity, my life, and the truth that deserved sunlight. Once she left, I sat at the table, surrounded by papers, receipts, screenshots, and timelines. It wasn't messy. It was organized. A map of betrayal. And at the center of that map were 2 names. Frank Harlow, Tessa Jordan. I opened my notebook and wrote the next step in bold letters. The church potluck. Every month, St. Mark's held a community potluck in the fellowship hall. Everyone in town came. It was the social event of our small Kentucky community. And this month's potluck was tomorrow. Tomorrow. The timing couldn't have been more perfect if I'd planned it myself. Frank had already told me he wouldn't be home until late tonight. A late shift, he claimed, which meant he'd show up tomorrow morning bleary-eyed and overconfident. The perfect setup for the kind of public truth he never saw coming. But I needed one more thing. Witnesses. Not gossipers. Not rumor spreaders. Actual witnesses who had seen Frank and Tessa together. I knew exactly who to call first. I called Louise Harper, the choir pianist. A sweet woman with soft gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. When she answered, I said gently, "Louise, I need to ask you something personal." She didn't hesitate. "Of course. Have you ever seen Frank and Tessa together, alone?" There was a long pause, then a sigh. "Oh, Maggie, I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that." My heart squeezed. "So you have." "Yes, and it didn't feel right. I never wanted to assume, but the way she touched his arm, the way he looked at her." Louise trailed off, guilt in her voice. "I didn't want to hurt you." "You didn't," I said. "You're helping me now. Do you need me to speak to Pastor Gaines?" "Tomorrow," I said softly, "at the potluck." Another pause. "Then I'll be there," Louise whispered. "I won't let you stand alone." Next I called Helen, the church treasurer. She had seen Frank deliver donations to Tessa's office multiple times. Her voice cracked when I asked. "I thought I was overthinking it," she said. "I should have said something sooner." "You will tomorrow," I told her gently. And she agreed. By the time the afternoon sun dipped behind the oak trees, I had 6 women quietly ready to support me at the potluck, not to fight, not to cause a scene, just to confirm the truth. To say, "Yes, I saw this too." To say, "You're not imagining this." To say, "You're not alone." Women who had kept quiet for fear of hurting me were now helping me for the sake of my dignity. It humbled me, strengthened me, steeled me. That night, Frank didn't come home until nearly midnight. He walked in smelling faintly of cologne. Not the one he wore for me, but the one he kept in his truck's glove compartment. He said, "Long night. Big sale." I didn't even blink. "Of course," I replied sweetly. "I hope you get some rest. Tomorrow's the potluck." He froze for a second, just long enough for me to see a flicker of panic cross his eyes. He swallowed. "Oh, Right. Yes, I'll be there. Good, I said. It'll be important. He didn't ask what that meant. He didn't dare. He simply nodded and went to bed. While he slept, snoring lightly, guilty, oblivious, I sat at my vanity, looking at my reflection in the mirror. My face wasn't the same face from a week ago. It wasn't tired. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't hurt. It was determined. A woman reborn. I placed one hand on the cool surface of the vanity and whispered to myself, tomorrow, the lie's end. Not quietly, not gently, not in the dark, but in the most public room in our whole town, the church fellowship hall, and I'd do it with grace, with poise, with truth. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply revealing what someone else tried so hard to hide. Tomorrow, Frank's image as the charming, loyal husband would crack like glass tomorrow. Tessa's mask of innocence would slip for everyone to see. Tomorrow, the storm would hit, and I would be the one holding the lightning. The next morning, the sky was a clean, pale blue. Calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm breaks open. I woke before Frank did. He lay beside me, snoring lightly, blissfully unaware that by the end of the day, his life would look nothing like it did now. I got dressed slowly, a soft blue blouse, simple earrings, my hair brushed neatly over my shoulders. Not glamorous, not flashy, just dignified. Dignity was important today. When Frank finally stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes like a man who'd barely slept, I was pouring coffee. He smiled weakly. Morning, sweetheart. I turned, matching his smile with one of my own. Morning, Frank. Ready for the potluck? His throat bobbed as he swallowed. As ready as I'll ever be. A strange answer. Uncomfortably honest. He was nervous. Good. He deserved to be. We drove separately. He claimed he had to swing by the dealership first, which was code for, I need to check on Tessa before she sees you. I didn't mind. In fact, I preferred it. It meant I could arrive early and prepare. When I pulled into the church parking lot, the scene was already buzzing. Old couples carrying crock-pots, kids running around the grass, women hauling in dishes with more foil than the entire grocery aisle. The fellowship hall smelled like casseroles, biscuits, fried chicken, and a lifetime of memories. But today, it smelled like truth. I walked in slowly, scanning the room. I didn't need to look long. Louise stood by the piano, her face tight but determined. Helen hovered near the dessert table, nerves twisting her hands. 4 other women Linda had contacted gathered quietly near the back, all of them watching me, all of them ready. When I approached, Louise gently touched my arm. Maggie, you're not alone. I know, I whispered, and for the first time I truly felt it. Tessa arrived next, floating in like the patron saint of false sweetness. She wore a soft pink dress, a delicate cardigan, and her hair curled just so. The picture of innocence, if you didn't know better. She smiled too widely, her eyes scanning the room, until they landed on me. The smile faltered. Good. I watched her swallow, tuck a curl behind her ear, and compose herself before stepping toward the choir table. A woman who had nothing to hide wouldn't look so nervous. Frank arrived 3 minutes later. He walked in with that fake confidence men wear when they think charm will cover sin. He wore the same cologne from the motel, the same guilty expression he thought I wouldn't notice. His eyes darted around the room, searching for one person. Her. He spotted Tessa near the choir table. Their eyes met for a microsecond. Quick, sharp, full of secrets. Then they both looked away too quickly. Most people wouldn't catch it. but the women gathered behind me noticed I heard Louise's quiet, breathy murmur. "Lord, have mercy." We all took our seats as the potluck began. Pastor Gaines welcomed everyone, thanked them for bringing dishes, and invited us to share in fellowship and community. Fellowship. If only he knew what kind of fellowship was happening behind his back. People began lining up for food, exchanging small talk, complimenting dishes. But my eyes were on one person, Frank. He hovered near the side door, nervous, tapping his foot. He kept glancing toward Tessa, who kept pointedly staring at the floor. Their guilt pulsed like a heartbeat between them. And then, I made my move. I stepped toward Pastor Gaines. He greeted me warmly. "Margaret, wonderful to see you." "Pastor, do you have a moment?" I asked softly. Of course. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I simply spoke clearly. "It's about your choir director." His brows lifted with concern. "Tessa, is something wrong?" "More than you know," I said calmly, pulling a few folded papers from my purse. The church complaint from her last job. The photos of her with married men. The article clippings. I didn't even show him everything. Just enough. His face drained of color. "My God." Louise stepped forward. "Pastor, I've seen things too. Things I didn't feel right keeping quiet." Helen followed. "So have I." Two other women added quietly, "It isn't just rumors, Pastor. It's real." Pastor Gaines looked shaken. He glanced toward Tessa, who was laughing nervously with someone near the lemonade table, completely unaware her time was running out. "Does Frank know about this?" he whispered. I swallowed. "He knows more than you think." That was all I needed to say. The pastor's face twisted in confusion, pain, realization. He understood, or at least enough. I need to speak to her immediately," he said. "You will," I replied. "But first I need something." "And what is that?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I need you standing next to me when I talk to them both." Pastor Gaines breathed in sharply but nodded. "Of course." Together, we walked toward the front of the fellowship hall near the piano. Louise joined us. Helen joined us. And slowly, as whispers traveled, other women stepped forward too. Not out of gossip, out of solidarity. The room quieted. Tessa sensed something was wrong. Her smile slipped. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her cardigan. "Tessa," the pastor called gently. Her head snapped up. Her face went pale when she saw all of us standing together. "Can you come here, please?" She hesitated, then walked over slowly, heels tapping faster than her breath. Frank noticed the shift. He straightened, confusion flickering. "What's going on?" he asked, walking toward us. And that's when it happened. The moment I had waited for. The moment I had planned. The moment I stepped out of the quiet, invisible role I'd lived in for far too long. I looked at both of them. The husband I trusted, and the woman he betrayed me with. And with a calmness that startled even me, I said, "It's time the truth stopped hiding." The entire fellowship hall fell silent. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations died. Eyes turned. Frank's face drained of blood. Tessa's eyes widened in horror. They both realized, at the exact same moment, the storm had come, and I was the one holding it. Every sound in the fellowship hall disappeared. The clatter of serving spoons, the chatter of families, the soft piano notes someone had been practicing gone. All that remained was a thick, heavy silence, wrapped around the four of us. Me, Frank, Tessa, and Pastor Gaines. Frank's eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape. Tessa looked like a porcelain doll someone had dropped, cracked, fragile, terrified. Pastor Gaines cleared his throat softly. "Margaret, you have the floor." His voice was gentle, but firm. The voice of a man who realized he'd let something poisonous grow under his roof. I nodded. My hands didn't shake. My breath was steady. For the first time in months, I wasn't scared of the truth. I was the truth. I reached into my purse and pulled out the first piece of paper, a simple jewelry receipt. I lifted it for everyone to see. "This," I said, my voice calm and clear, "is a receipt for a gold bracelet, engraved with the initials T.J. A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. I turned to Tessa. "Your initials." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then I held up a second paper, the complaint from her previous church, and this is a written concern filed by a pastor from your last congregation about inappropriate closeness with married men. Gasps echoed around the hall. Tessa's eyes filled with tears. Her hands trembled. But I wasn't done. I held up a third paper, a printed photo of her, smiling intimately with a man wearing a wedding ring. "This is you," I said softly, "2 years ago. And this is not your husband." Tessa's face drained of color. Frank finally snapped out of his frozen daze. He stepped forward, voice cracking. "Maggie, what are you doing? We shouldn't. This isn't." "Stop," I said quietly. He froze. At that moment, I realized the power of a woman who has finally had enough a woman, who has seen lies for what they are. A woman who has nothing left to lose. I turned to him fully. "You told me you were working late." My voice didn't rise, because I didn't need it to. "You told me you were volunteering at the church. You told me you were tired, busy, overwhelmed." He swallowed hard. "Maggie, please, let's talk about this privately." "No," I said. The single word cut through the room like a blade. "No more privacy. You chose secrets, so we'll speak in the light." His jaw tightened. His eyes flickered with something like regret, or fear, or both. I stepped closer. "I followed you yesterday, Frank." A full-body shiver moved across him. "You didn't go to the dealership. You didn't go to volunteer. You went to the Blue Lantern Inn. With her." I pointed at Tessa. Her face collapsed. Frank's mouth opened, then closed. He had no words left to twist. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Soft, stunned, sympathetic gasps. People covered their mouths. Eyes widened. Someone whispered, "Oh, Lord." Louise stepped forward, her voice firm. "I saw them together behind the church last month. Too close to be appropriate." Helen added, "And he delivered donations to her office on days she wasn't even scheduled to work." Another woman spoke up. "We saw them leave after choir practice. Together." And just like that, I wasn't alone. Their voices didn't attack. They simply confirmed what I already knew. Truth, spoken by many, feels like justice. Tessa finally broke. I didn't mean. Frank said." Her voice trembled, desperate and small. "He said he wasn't happy. He said things were different at home. He said—" "Stop," I said softly. She went silent instantly. "I'm not here to fight you," I continued. "You are young. You are foolish. You are easily charmed by men who should know better." She blinked, confused. "And I'm not blaming you for my husband's choices. He made them himself." Frank flinched. "But I am holding you accountable," I added steadily, "for repeating patterns you've lived before, for hurting families you barely know, for playing innocent while breaking trust." Tessa covered her face with shaking hands. For the first time, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I turned back to Frank, the man I fed, the man I trusted, the man I loved for 34 years. "Frank," I said softly, "I would have forgiven unhappiness, I would have forgiven distance. I would have forgiven struggles. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. But betrayal, with lies, with secrecy, with a girl who could be our daughter. He crumbled, literally. His shoulders sagged, his face fell. He looked decades older. Maggie, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. No, I whispered. You made a choice. Silence wrapped the room again. I continued. And now, I'm making mine. The entire hall leaned in, not out of gossip, but out of awe, because it's not every day a woman finds her voice after losing her trust. You will leave our home today, I said calmly. You will pack your things, and you will not step foot in my house again unless invited. Frank's face collapsed. Maggie, please. Can we talk about this privately? Please. No, I said again. This is where you chose to betray me. This is where the truth belongs. I turned to Pastor Gaines. I will no longer attend this church while she works here. If she remains, I will quietly step away. I won't cause trouble, but I won't support this pattern. Pastor Gaines looked at Tessa, then at me, then at the congregation. He nodded solemnly. She will be placed on immediate leave while we investigate further. Tessa burst into tears. Frank reached out, desperate. Maggie, don't do this! I stepped back. You already did. And then it was over. Not because the pain disappeared, not because everything magically healed, but because the truth had finally left the shadows. People approached me. Gentle hands, warm hugs, soft words. I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve this. You're stronger than you know. Frank stood alone, trembling, exposed, humiliated. Tessa sobbed into a tissue, shaking uncontrollably. But me, I walked out of the fellowship hall with my head high, not victorious, not vengeful, but free. The sunlight hit my face as I stepped outside. And for the first time in months, I felt something warm in my chest. Not hope, something better. A future. My future. Without lies. Without secrets. Without him. When the doors of the fellowship hall closed behind me, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is walk away without waiting to see who's watching. The afternoon sun felt warm on my skin, almost gentle. The breeze touched my cheek like a reminder. You survived the worst of it. I stood in the parking lot for a long moment, just breathing, not rushing, not hurrying, not trembling. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Or maybe like the version of myself I had forgotten existed. Frank didn't come after me. Of course he didn't. He stayed inside, drowning in the consequences he had poured for himself. People would talk. People would judge. People would whisper. But none of that was my burden anymore. His shame was his own. I drove home slowly, hands steady on the wheel. I didn't cry. Not once. Grief had already done its work. Anger had already burned its fire. Now came the quiet after the storm, the kind of quiet women earn. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw his truck already there. Parked crooked, hurried, panicked. He had rushed home, probably hoping for one last conversation, one last chance to soften the blow, one last opportunity to plead and perform. I turned off my car and sat still for a moment. You're not the same woman who feared his reactions. I stepped out, shoulders straight. He burst out of the front door. Maggie, please, please, listen. I already listened, I said calmly, unlocking my car trunk. And now you need to. He froze. I pointed toward the driveway. Your boxes are already in the garage. You can take them and leave. His eyes widened in disbelief. You packed my things." "No," I said softly. "I packed your lies. Your things are yours to handle." He blinked rapidly, tears forming. "I made a mistake." "No," I said sharply but quietly. "You made a choice." He tried again, voice cracking. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "Yes, you did." I didn't raise my voice. Truth doesn't need volume. He wiped his face, desperate. "Can't we go inside and talk like adults?" "We are talking like adults," I replied. "This is the conversation." I stepped closer, close enough to see the guilt etched into every line of his face. "Frank, I loved you. I built a life with you. I trusted you. You didn't just cheat on me. You let me carry a marriage alone while you lived a secret life next to mine." He dropped his head. "And now," I continued, "I am choosing myself." He whispered, broken. "Are you leaving me?" "No, Frank." I inhaled deeply. "I'm setting myself free." He bowed his head, shoulders shaking. For a moment, I saw the man he used to be, the man who promised to love, honor, protect. But promises without action are just empty words. "I'll send you the papers," I said quietly. "I've already called my lawyer." He looked up, stunned. You already?" "Yes." "Because women don't need permission to reclaim their lives. We just need clarity. And I had plenty." He didn't argue any more. He just nodded, slowly, defeated, and went to the garage to start loading his boxes into his truck. I walked into the house without looking back. The moment the door closed, the silence was different. Not heavy, not lonely. Peaceful. A silence earned. Later that evening, the phone rang. I hesitated before answering, but when I saw the name, I exhaled. "Linda." "Maggie? You all right, honey?" "Yes," I said honestly. "I'm all right." She let out a soft breath. "You were brave today. Braver than most." "I didn't feel brave," I admitted. "I just felt done." She chuckled warmly. Done can feel like bravery. She was right. After we hung up, a second call came, this time from Louise. "Maggie," she said gently, "just wanted you to know. Everyone at church is talking about your strength. Not the scandal. You." My chest warmed, not from pride, but from relief. For the first time, the spotlight wasn't on my humiliation. It was on my courage. The next day, Pastor Gaines called. He apologized for missing the signs, for trusting too quickly, for not protecting his congregation better. He also informed me that Tessa had been placed on full suspension, pending investigation. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't want to see her ruined. But I wanted her stopped. Maybe this would finally be the lesson she couldn't skip. Frank moved in with his brother temporarily. Not with Tessa. Rumor had it she avoided all contact after the potluck, apparently realizing that men who cheat with you also cheat on you. Life has a way of teaching harsh truths. As weeks passed, the sting faded. Slowly. Gently. Like a bruise losing its color. I joined a senior yoga class, started volunteering at the library, took morning walks, bought myself fresh flowers, small things, quiet things, healing things. One afternoon, I stood in my garden, watering the roses, when I suddenly realized I felt happy, not because of what happened, but because of what I had reclaimed, my dignity, my voice, my future. People asked if I was lonely now that Frank was gone. But truthfully, I had been lonely with him. Being alone was a relief. Being alone was peace. Being alone was freedom. And freedom, I discovered, is far more satisfying than staying in a marriage built on lies. Months later, after everything had settled, I sat at my dining table, the same table where I first found the bracelet in the drawer. and whispered a quiet promise to myself. I will never shrink myself to fit someone else's betrayals again. And I meant it, because storms don't break strong women. They reveal them. I wasn't just Margaret Harlow, the betrayed wife. I was Margaret Harlow, the woman who walked through fire and came out made of steel. And this time, I wasn't going back. If you've been listening to this story, please like, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're listening from. Your support helps me share more stories of strength, healing, and powerful women reclaiming their lives.